The winter of 1885 descended upon Montana with a ferocity that threatened to bury the territory under a shroud of white. In the town of Whispering Pines, the wind howled like a wounded animal, driving snow into drifts that reached the windowsills of the storefronts. The sky was a relentless, bruised purple, heavy with the promise of yet another storm. It was the kind of weather that drove men to the warmth of the saloon or the comfort of their hearths, but on the wooden platform of the Overland stage station, four brothers stood like statues carved from ice, ignoring the biting cold that nipped at their ears and fingers. Colt Mercer, the eldest of the clan, stood with his boots planted firmly in the snow, his breath puffing out in white clouds that were instantly snatched away by the wind. He checked his pocket watch for the third time in as many minutes. The metal was freezing against his gloved palm. At 32, Colt was a man seemingly chiseled from the granite of the mountains that surrounded them. He bore the weight of the Mercer Ranch on his shoulders, a responsibility he had inherited too young and carried too long. It had been his desperate, practical idea to answer the advertisements in the matrimonial papers. The ranch needed a soft touch, a future, and children to fill the silence of the log house. But as the snow swirled around him, doubt gnawed at his gut warmer than any fire. He wondered if he had damned them all. Beside him, Wyatt shifted his weight, stomping his boots to keep the blood flowing. Wyatt was the charming one, the gambler who usually faced life with a crooked grin and a loaded deck. Today, however, his grin was gone. He tugged at the collar of his heavy wool coat, looking more nervous than he had ever been at a poker table with his life savings in the pot. He had requested a woman with wit, someone who could keep up with his fast-talking ways, but the reality of a stranger coming to live in the harsh Montana winter was suddenly terrifying. Jude, the third brother, stood slightly behind the others, his back to the wind. He was the scholar, the dreamer who often had his nose in a book rather than watching the horizon. He clutched a leather-bound volume of poetry under his arm, a talisman against the anxiety churning in his stomach. He had written to a woman who appreciated the quiet arts, fearing that the harshness of ranch life would break a delicate spirit before the first thaw. And then there was Levi, the youngest at barely 21. He was practically vibrating, not just from the cold, but from sheer, unadulterated hope. His eyes were bright, scanning the white horizon for the dark shape of the stagecoach. He had asked simply for kindness. In his mind, he had built a castle of dreams where a smiling woman made the brutal winters feel like spring. "She's late," Colt grumbled, his voice rough as gravel. "The pass is likely drifted over," Wyatt replied, his voice tight. "Old Pete is a good driver, but he ain't a magician. If they don't get here soon, they'll be stuck in the dark." As if summoned by their collective worry, a dark speck appeared against the white expanse of the valley floor. The muffled sound of hooves crunching through deep snow and the jingle of harnesses drifted on the wind. The stagecoach emerged from the swirl of white, rocking violently as it navigated the unplowed road. It was a black beetle struggling across a white sheet. The coach groaned to a halt in front of the station, the horses blowing steam from their nostrils, their coats matted with ice. Old Pete, the driver, wrapped in so many furs he looked like a bear, climbed down and spat a stream of tobacco juice into the snow, staining it brown. "Mercer boys!" Pete shouted over the wind. "Got a special delivery. Though I reckon you bit off more than you can chew this time." The road was near impossible. "Are they all right?" Levi asked, stepping forward, his heart in his throat. "They're alive," Pete grunted. "Hardier than they look." Colt stepped forward to the door, steeling himself. He expected 3 women. There had been a mix-up in the letters, or so he thought, but 3 brides were due. He reached for the handle, but the door swung open from the inside. The world seemed to stop. Against the backdrop of the grey sky and the blinding white snow, color exploded onto the platform. The first woman to step out took Levi's breath away. She was petite, wrapped in a thick coat, but beneath it, the hem of a vibrant emerald silk cheongsam brushed against the snow. Around her neck was a scarf of brilliant crimson red, stark and beautiful against the winter gloom. Her hair was black as a raven's wing, pinned up in an intricate style that defied the wind. Her eyes were dark, almond-shaped, and filled with a terrified but undeniable wonder. She turned back and offered a hand to the second woman. This one moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, her chin held high. She wore a similar high-collared silk dress in deep sapphire, visible under her furs, and the same striking red scarf. Her gaze swept over the brothers with the intensity of a hawk assessing its prey. Then came the third, clutching a satchel as if it contained the crown jewels. She seemed shyer, her movements tentative. She wore a cheongsam of amethyst purple, and when she looked up, her eyes held a depth that made Jude's heart skip a beat. But it was the fourth figure that made Colt freeze. He counted again. 4. There were supposed to be 3. The fourth woman stepped down last. She was the tallest of them, radiating an aura of command that silenced the wind. Her dress was a deep, rich maroon, embroidered with gold thread that caught the faint light. The red scarf around her neck seemed less like an accessory and more like a banner of war. She looked at Colt, her eyes steady, dark, and filled with a weary strength that mirrored his own. The 4 women stood in a row, the wind whipping the ends of their red scarves. It was impossible to miss the resemblance. The same high cheekbones, the same porcelain skin, the same determined set of their jaws. Sisters, Wyatt whispered, echoing the shock of everyone on the platform. They're sisters. Old Pete chuckled, dragging a trunk from the roof. Like a set of fine porcelain dolls, all shipped to the wildest corner of the territory. Good luck, boys. Colt finally found his voice. He took a step toward the eldest. There's been a mistake. We were expecting 3 brides. From the east. The eldest woman straightened her spine. Her voice was melodic, accented but clear, cutting through the cold air. There is no mistake, Mr. Mercer. I am Mai Lin. These are my sisters, Lian, Ying, Annan. You sent letters to the agency. We answered. But the agency Colt began. The agency listed for Mercer Brothers, Mai interrupted, her gaze never wavering. We saw an opportunity to remain together. We took it. But you have Colt gestured vaguely, unsure how to address the obvious cultural chasm without causing offense. We are from San Francisco, Mai said, answering the unasked question. But our family. We needed to leave. We are willing to work. We are willing to be wives. But we come as a family. We do not separate. Behind her, the 3 younger sisters moved closer together, their silk shoulders touching. They looked freezing, their teeth ready to chatter, but they stood their ground. Levi looked at Anne, the youngest, and saw her shivering. We can't talk out here, Colt said abruptly, the protective instinct overriding the confusion. You'll freeze to death in those silks. Load the trunks, boys. We're heading to the ranch. Wait, Mai said, her hand rising. Do you accept us? If you do not, we will wait for the next stage back. Colt looked at the 4 women. He saw the meager luggage that held their entire lives. He saw the fear they were trying so desperately to hide behind their stoic expressions. He saw the red scarves, bright flags of hope in a desolate winter. Get in the wagon, Colt said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Nobody is going back in this storm. The ride to the Mercer Ranch was a silent, tense affair. The heavy wagon wheels sliced through the snow, the horses straining against the drifts. Inside the covered bed of the wagon, the brothers and sisters sat opposite each other, knees almost touching. The air was thick with unasked questions. The ranch house, a sprawling structure of pine logs and stone, looked like a fortress against the white landscape. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. When they stepped inside, the warmth hit them like a physical blow. The scent of pine and old leather filled the air. It's small, Lian, the second sister, said. She was the one in blue, the one with the hawk-like gaze. She looked around the main room, her nose wrinkling slightly. It's warm, Wyatt shot back, though he couldn't help but stare at the intricate embroidery on her collar. And it keeps the wolves out. Wolves? And squeaked, her eyes widening. He's joking, Levi said quickly, shooting a glare at his brother. Mostly. The first few days were a lesson in chaos. The house, built for 4 bachelors, suddenly felt like a tin of sardines. The cultural collision was immediate and jarring. The Mercer brothers were used to silence, simple stews, and tracking mud on the floor. The Lynn sisters were a whirlwind of color, fast-paced chatter in a language the men didn't understand, and a level of cleanliness that baffled the cowboys. Mai took command of the kitchen with a quiet authority that rivaled Colt's management of the herd. The brothers watched, fascinated and confused, as she raided their pantry. She frowned at the salted pork and beans but nodded approvingly at the sacks of flour and the dried vegetables. That first dinner was a revelation. Instead of the usual heavy stew, Mai and her sisters presented a table filled with steamed buns made from wheat flour, stir-fried vegetables seasoned with dried ginger they had brought in their trunks, and meat sliced so thin it melted on the tongue. Colt sat at the head of the table, holding his fork like a foreign object. He looked at Mai. "This isn't what we're used to." "It is better," Mai said simply, pouring hot tea into tin cups. "You need strength for the cold. Heavy grease makes the mind slow." Colt took a bite. The flavors exploded in his mouth, savory, sharp, and clean. He looked up to catch Mai watching him, a hint of anxiety in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "It's good," he said. The tension in Mai's shoulders released. The days turned into weeks, and the winter deepened. The snow piled higher, sealing the ranch off from the rest of the world. In this isolation, the strange dance between the brothers and the sisters began to find a rhythm. Levi and Ann were the first to bridge the gap. They were the youngest, unburdened by the cynicism of their elders. Levi found Ann in the barn one morning, talking softly to the horses. She was wearing her red scarf wrapped tightly around her head, her cheeks flushed with cold. "They like you," Levi said, leaning on a pitchfork. Ann smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "They are gentle giants. In the city, the horses are frightened, always running on cobblestones. Here, they have peace." "You like the peace?" Levi asked. "I like the snow," she admitted, giggling as she caught a snowflake on her glove. "It covers everything. It makes the world look new." Levi spent the afternoon showing her how to throw a snowball. Their laughter rang out across the frozen yard, a sound that hadn't been heard on the Mercer ranch in years. Jude and Ying found their connection in silence. Ying had claimed a corner of the main room near the fireplace. She set up a small station with ink brushes and paper she had guarded with her life. Jude, usually retreating to his books, found himself watching her. Her hand moved with a delicacy that mesmerized him, creating sweeping landscapes of bamboo and mountains from black ink. One evening, he approached her, holding his book of poetry. "You're an artist," he said softly. Ying looked up, her eyes wide. "I paint what I remember. So I do not forget. May I?" He offered the book. "It's words, not pictures. But it paints a feeling." Ying took the book, her fingers brushing his. They spent the next hour sitting by the fire, Jude reading stanzas aloud, and Ying translating the emotions into quick, elegant sketches on the page. They didn't need much conversation, the ink and the words spoke for them. Wyatt and Leanne, however, were fire and gasoline. Leanne refused to be relegated to the house. She marched out to the corrals in her silk dress, hemmed up and tucked into men's trousers she had borrowed, or stolen, from Wyatt's chest. "You can't ride in that," Wyatt scoffed, leaning against a fence post. "And certainly not in this weather." Leanne didn't answer. She grabbed a bridle, approached the wildest mare in the pen, and within moments had the animal calm and tact. She mounted with a grace that put the seasoned cowboys to shame. She rode a circle around the paddock, the horse responding to her slightest touch. She pulled up in front of a stunned Wyatt, her breath misting in the air. "My father insisted we learn to ride. He said a woman who cannot control a beast cannot control her destiny." Wyatt grinned, a genuine, dazzled smile. "I stand corrected, darling. Remind me never to bet against you." "You would lose," Leanne said, her eyes flashing with amusement. "Colt and Mai were a different story. Their relationship was built on the heavy silence of responsibility. They were the pillars holding up their respective families. One night, a blizzard struck with terrifying force. The wind shrieked like a banshee, shaking the log walls. A shutter on the upper floor banged violently, threatening to tear loose. Colt grabbed his coat, but Mai was already at the door, a hammer in her hand. "I'll hold the lantern," she yelled over the wind. "It's too dangerous," Colt argued. "You need 2 hands to fix it." "Who will hold the light?" "One of the dreamers." Mai challenged. They went out together into the white vortex. The cold was agonizing. Mai held the lantern high, shielding the flame with her body while Colt hammered the shutter into place. The wind tried to knock them off the ladder, but they braced against each other. When they tumbled back inside, covered in snow and shivering, there was a new understanding between them. Colt looked at her, melting snow dripping from his hair. He saw not a delicate flower, but a woman of steel. "You did good, Mai." "We did good," she corrected, handing him a towel. But the peace of the winter lockdown could not last forever. The thaw began in late February, and with the melting snow came the mail. And with the mail came fear. Jude brought the letter from town. He handed it to Mai, his face pale. "It's addressed to the Lin sisters. From San Francisco." Mai took the envelope. Her hands trembled, just once. She opened it, read the contents, and the color drained from her face. She whispered something in Chinese to her sisters. The joy that had inhabited the house for the last 2 months evaporated instantly. That night, the sisters retreated to their room. The brothers sat in the main room, the silence heavy and suffocating. "What is it?" Colt finally asked the next morning, cornering Mai in the kitchen. She was staring out the window, her red scarf loose around her neck. "It is a debt," Mai said, her voice hollow. "Our father. He was a merchant. A powerful man named Thaddeus Harrington. He claims our father owed him a fortune. When our father died, Harrington claimed us as payment. He wanted to sell us into arrangements." Colt's hands clenched into fists. "That's why you ran. We saw the ad. We thought if we were married, if we were far away in Montana, he could not touch us." She looked at Colt, tears brimming in her eyes. "He has found us. He is coming." "He can come," Colt said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "But he ain't leaving with anything." 2 days later, a stranger rode into the yard. He wasn't Harrington. He was a man in a long duster coat, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a hat. He introduced himself as Agent Cole of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. The brothers met him on the porch. The sisters watched from the window, huddled together like frightened birds. "I'm looking for 4 women," Cole said, his voice dry as dust. "Runaways. Stolen property, according to my client." "People ain't property in Montana," Wyatt said, his hand resting casually near the Colt peacemaker on his hip. "Mr. Harrington has paperwork," Cole said, unfazed. "Guardianship papers. Debts transferred. It's all legal." "I don't care about paper," Colt said. "They are under my protection." Cole looked at the brothers, noting the resolve in their stance. He tipped his hat. "Mr. Harrington is a day behind me. He's bringing the sheriff. I suggest you prepare a defense better than stubbornness." When Harrington arrived, he came in a black sleigh pulled by 4 draft horses, looking like a king surveying his conquered lands. He was a man of soft hands and cruel eyes, wrapped in expensive furs that cost more than the Mercer Ranch made in a year. The sheriff, a good man named Miller who looked uncomfortable, rode beside him. The Mercer brothers stood in a line in the snow. Behind them, on the porch, stood the Lin sisters. They were not hiding. They wore their Keongsams and their red scarves, bright defiance against the melting slush. "Gentlemen," Harrington called out, his voice oily. "You are harboring fugitives. I am here to collect my wards." "They aren't wards," Colt said. "And they aren't leaving. I have the law." Harrington shouted, waving a sheaf of papers. "Sheriff, arrest these men for kidnapping." Leanne stepped forward, her blue silk rustling. "We were not kidnapped. We fled a monster." Harrington sneered. "Quiet, girl. You don't know what's good for you." The tension was a physical weight. Wyatt's hand twitched toward his gun. Levi stepped in front of and Jude stood beside Ying, looking ready to hit someone with a book if necessary. Suddenly, Agent Cole stepped out from the shadows of the barn. "Hold on, Sheriff." Harrington looked annoyed. "Cole? Get these girls in the sleigh." "I've been doing some checking, Mr. Harrington," Cole said, walking slowly into the center of the yard. "Since you hired me to find them, I looked into the debt you claimed their father owed." "That is private business," Harrington snapped. "It's federal business now," Cole said, pulling a notebook from his pocket. "Turns out, you cooked the books. The Lin father didn't owe you a dime. In fact, you owed him. You forged the guardianship papers to cover your tracks and seize his assets, including his daughters." The color drained from Harrington's face. "Lies. You're fired." "You can't fire the truth," Cole said. He looked at the sheriff. "Miller, I have the telegrams from the San Francisco precinct confirming the forgery. This man is wanted for fraud and extortion." Sheriff Miller's relief was palpable. He turned his horse toward the sleigh. "Thaddeus Harrington, step out of the vehicle." Harrington sputtered, looking from the detective to the brothers, and finally to the sisters. He saw no fear in Mai's eyes anymore, only triumph. He slumped, defeated not by bullets, but by the very law he tried to twist. As the sheriff hauled Harrington away, and Agent Cole tipped his hat and rode off, a silence fell over the ranch. But it wasn't the heavy silence of winter. It was the fresh, clean silence of spring. Colt turned to Mai. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a trembling vulnerability in its wake. "He's gone," Colt said. "He is gone," Mai whispered. The contract, Colt started, struggling for words. "You came here because you had to. To escape him. You don't have to stay anymore. You're free." The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of melting snow and pine. Mai looked at her sisters. Leanne was already holding Wyatt's hand, arguing playfully about who would have drawn their gun first. Jude and Ying were smiling shyly at each other. Levi was swinging around in a circle, her laughter ringing like a bell. Mai looked back at Colt. She stepped forward, the red scarf fluttering against his chest. "We came for safety," she said. "But we found something else." "What did you find?" Colt asked, his voice hoarse. "Home," Mai said. She reached out and took his rough, calloused hand in hers. "We found a home. And I found a man who would face a blizzard and a tycoon for me." Colt's stone face cracked, a smile breaking through. "I'd face worse," he promised. "Then we stay," Mai said. "Not because of a letter. Not because of a debt. But because we choose to." The winter sun finally broke through the heavy clouds, bathing the Mercer Ranch in golden light. The snow was melting, revealing the earth beneath, ready for new growth. The four brothers and the four sisters stood together, a family forged in the cold, bound by red scarves and courage, ready to build a dynasty under the vast, open sky of Montana. They had ordered brides, but they had received destiny. And as the last of the winter wind died down, the warmth of the ranch house beckoned them inside, promising a future that was bright, loud, and full of love.